Good morning. Many years ago, I went on a journey to Utah with a friend of mine to visit the national parks in the southern part of the state. It came at a time when I was discerning God's call for me and for my family. I was unsure of where my life's journey was heading, and I was hoping that God could give me some answers. One of our goals was to hike into these remote and difficult locations to experience the beauty of the West. One hike was to the top of Angel's Landing in Zion National Park. It was a strenuous and difficult and dangerous hike with these steep, rapid elevation gains in the sun with temperatures over 90 degrees. But what was even more difficult than the physical effort was the psychological fear and challenges. In some places, this path was only a couple of feet wide, with these steep drops of over 1,000 feet on each side. And the only item we had to hold on to was this metal chain link rope to steady ourselves as we ascended up to the top of the mountain. And when we reached the top, the views, they were glorious in all directions. As I sat on top of the mountain, I felt a sense of peace, a nearness to God, and a renewed sense of purpose, unafraid of what lay ahead in my own life and the crosses that I would need to endure. In our gospel passage today, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John to a remote mountain location. They ascend to the top to pray and to experience the grandeur of the beauty of the mountain. But why does he go to this lonely mountaintop? I think to understand, we need to put ourselves in Jesus' place. By this time in his ministry, he is on his way to his cross, his passion, death, and resurrection, which we will remember and celebrate just 5 weeks from now. He goes to this lonely mountain to seek and to confirm God's will for him. The Mount of Transfiguration was for Jesus a spiritual mountain peak. Was he taking the right path? Was he right to journey to Jerusalem to be hung on a cross? I think the verdict was a resounding yes. First Moses, the greatest of all prophets and lawgivers, then Elijah, the greatest of the prophets, tell him to go forward. And then comes the voice of God from a crowd, from this cloud that shouts his approval. It was this experience on the Mount of Transfiguration that enabled Jesus to walk the way of the cross. Can you imagine the amazement on Peter, James, and John's face when Jesus' face shone like the sun and his clothing became white like light? They were given a glimpse of God's glory to strengthen their own journey in life. Peter wanted to stay on top of the mountain, just like I wanted to stay on top of Zion's Angel's Landing peak. You know, it's natural to try and stay where we are comfortable, where there is joy and serenity. Yet we all must descend the mountain and walk the path of life that challenges us. We each face difficulties, sorrows, and heartbreaks. We each have our own crosses to bear. We each have fears like the 3 apostles who threw themselves on the ground at the sound of God's voice. Yet Jesus offers us comfort and encouragement to his apostles and to you and me today. He tells them to rise and do not be afraid. These words echo throughout all of Scripture. Do not be afraid. They give us comfort in times of fear and uncertainty. They prompt us to focus on what is truly important, not on worldly concerns, but to have an open heart, to listen to him, to trust in his voice, to do his will, and to follow him. Do not be afraid were the words that characterize the papal ministry of St. Pope John Paul II. Who could forget the words of his first homily after becoming Pope? Do not be afraid. Open wide the doors for Christ. These words framed a pontificate that set in motion the events that freed a communist Eastern Europe, that withstood an assassin's bullet, that forgave his would-be killer, that carried the cross of Parkinson's disease, that traveled the world for 26 years proclaiming the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. As we continue our Lenten journey, we may not know what lies ahead. We may not know where God is leading us, but we trust in his love, his guidance, and his mercy. Lent is a time for us to draw closer to him by opening wide the doors for Christ in our life through prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Lent is the time to ascend to the top of the spiritual mountain, to gain strength and courage, and to discern his will for us. And then descend the mountain, to live our faith in the world with all its joys, and yes, with sorrows as well. Rise, and do not be afraid are words to encourage us on our Lenten journey and beyond. It won't be easy. There will be setbacks and stumbles. We will make mistakes. There are minefields waiting for us and crosses to bear. But that, too, is part of our journey. Rise, and do not be afraid gives us the courage to strive towards a paradise that we can't even begin to imagine, where Christ dwells in light and in love, transfigured forever. We are not alone, not ever. Christ is waiting for us, hoping for us, praying for us. So rise and do not be afraid. God bless you.